All right, good evening, everybody. I am Jackie Ball, Director of Government Affairs at National PTA. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and taking time out of your evening away from your families to join us here this evening. Tonight we have Joshua Westfall, Government Affairs Manager at National PTA with us as well, in addition to a special guest, Mike Sullivan, the Federal Legislative Chair from Colorado. We're really glad that you're able to join us to talk about how to have successful Hill meetings and navigating DC. This webinar is the final webinar in our four-part series leading up to the 2016 PTA Legislative Conference held in Washington, D.C. PTA has a long history of being effective advocates for all children and their families. Founded in 1897, PTA is the oldest and largest volunteer child advocacy association in the United States. Since our inception, we have worked side by side with policymakers at every level of government to improve the lives of our nation's children. This webinar will help provide information on what components make for a successful Hill meeting, key tips for advocates to improve their Hill ask, and recommendations on how to navigate DC and Capitol Hill. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to review the agenda for tonight's webinar. First, we'll talk about some common myths people have regarding Hill meetings, and we will hear from our guest speaker, Mike Sullivan, the FLC from Colorado. Then we'll discuss how to make the most of your time in a Hill meeting to get the best results. Then we'll talk about some of the logistics of Capitol Hill so you can get a sense of the environment. And finally, we'll walk through some of the new PTA advocacy resources at your disposal. Let's talk about some common misconceptions people have about advocating on Capitol Hill. I'd really like to debunk these myths tonight, and I'm really excited that we have our special guest here to help us do that. We often hear a lot of things that aren't entirely accurate about how advocacy works in Congress and in state legislatures. First, people often think that their voice doesn't matter in terms of affecting federal policy. Next, we hear a lot that people don't think that meeting with a staff member is helpful since the legislator is doing the voting. I would articulate, and our guest speaker will tell you from his personal experience, that actually meeting with a staff member is probably the most important thing because they are the gatekeepers for information that ultimately gets to the member of Congress and will influence their decision making on whether or not to support the issues or the topics or policies that you bring to their attention. Finally, we hear that advocates think that since they only come to Washington, D.C. a few times or even once a year, that their meeting really won't mean a lot and they won't have a lasting impact. However, our special guest here will tell you how that is not true, how all these things are not true. So I'd like to introduce you to Mike Sullivan, the Federal Legislative Chair of Colorado PTA, to have him tell you about his personal experiences with each of these. So Mike, I'd like you to ask you how you would respond to someone who says that their voice doesn't matter in the grand scheme of federal policymaking.
Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me to tell this story because the story of how our meeting went last year with Senator Bennett in particular, I think is a great answer to that. Last year, we had a meeting scheduled with Senator Bennett and his education staffer, Juliana Herman, and as soon as we got there, the very first thing Juliana said was, gotta warn you, gotta give you a heads up, the senator is sick as a dog, and he is not going to be able to stay for very long at all. And my first reaction, I think, was pretty natural. I felt pretty bummed, and I was thinking, this is really going to be a wasted meeting. But then I decided, okay, well, let's make the most of the time that we have, and refocused and made Juliana the primary target audience for the pitch that we had prepared for the senator. And we launched into the meat of the pitch with her. And then after a few minutes, Senator Bennett came in and said hello, and we gave a very, very quick elevator pitch, and really nothing more than that. It's just a summary of why we were there. No depth at all. And we saw Senator was clearly suffering, so he took a photo with us. It actually the photo you're looking at right there, and politely and very apologetically excused himself, and we continued on with the real meat of the conversation. Whoop. Sorry about that. Somebody's at the door. We continued with the meat of the conversation with Juliana, and then after the Hill visit, I sent Juliana a thank you note, and again, I outlined our argument once more, and I was still very actively selling to her. I was really giving a pitch to her in those emails, and we traded a few emails, and she said she wanted to meet with us to discuss this in more depth. She had gone deeper in the bill, and she had discussed it with the senator, and he was interested, but he really wanted to make sure that anything he did was directly supporting and addressing issues that Colorado parents were interested in. So we set up a conference call with, I think it was, I don't know, 5 or 10 parents from Colorado PTA, and we met with Juliana and gave her the real full version of the argument for family engagement. And it was really just about a week later that the Senate Help Committee put out their draft reauthorization of the SEA that had no real meaningful family engagement included, and we were all very dismayed. Soon after that, Juliana, I think, contacted you, Jacki, directly at National, and said that Senator Bennett was going to be bringing forward an amendment to add the statewide family engagement centers to the bill. And Senator Bennett worked real hard with all of us for the amendment, and as a result, the amendment passed, and the centers are included in ESSA. And so clearly, our one visit there, in the end, ended up mattering quite a bit in the grand scheme.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I still remember that vividly, Mike. So you know, I remember her calling me after all the communications and the meeting that she had with all of you. So you really have debunked, I think, all 3 of those myths, and that parent voice does matter, and that meeting a staff member is just as, if not more, important than meeting with the member. I just wanted to ask you if you wanted to expand at all about, you know, meeting with, particularly in this case, Juliana or other staff members, and how, you know, you've gone about. You said you were disappointed that you didn't get to meet, or that when you found out that Senator Bennett wouldn't be there for the entire meeting, and you really were able to adjust and handle that that circumstance well. How have you kind of continued to maintain that relationship with Juliana and as the staff member to keep PTA priorities and issues at the forefront of Senator Bennett's work in the Senate?
Well, yeah, I think that, as you said, it was disappointing at first when we found out that we would have maybe a minute with the senator. But in the end, I realized that I really believe that without Juliana's support and advocacy to her boss, the senator, the centers would not have become part of reauthorization. And we realized on the spot there that it was indeed Juliana that we needed to convince, and that she would do the convincing of the senator for us. And that really was the key lesson. And over the months that followed, you know, we were repeatedly sending her emails and just keeping the dialogue going. And I know that I continued to look at her as the person that I really needed to be talking to. And when there were, I remember when they were streaming the committee hearings, and Senator Alexander he was making some comments that showed that he fundamentally misunderstood what was in the amendment. I sent an email to Juliana and gave her some some talking points and some bullet points to continue the argument forward. And all along, I just kept saying, you know, I know that you're in the background, you're not in the limelight, but I recognize, I know what's going on, and I recognize that you really are a key driving force in this, and you know, you are behind some really great and important work. So I think it was just a sustained effort to treat her as the person that we see as the key.
That's great. No, Mike, and I think that really highlights the importance of you know, the staffer's role in that, you know, although as you can probably say as well, sometimes they look really, really young, but you certainly gave Juliana the respect that she deserved, and clearly not only because of that respect, but, you know, engagement that you had with her and the knowledge and information that you were able to provide to her on family engagement she really valued, and that really helped this relationship. And Senator Bennett is a huge champion of family engagement because of all the work that you and Juliana have done, and the rest of the Colorado PTA delegation. I love when I go into his office to meet with Juliana myself. He has the history of the Colorado PTA book sitting on the coffee table in his office. So you know, he cares about PTA and Colorado parents, and that's a lot in part to the work that you all have done as well with not only Juliana, but the office as a whole, and the senator as well.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask one final question. You know, I know everyone's very busy, and not everyone lives in DC, and you know, it's a great opportunity to come to LegCon and be able to meet with their members. And how have you, and I know we just talked a little bit about maintaining that relationship, but how would you respond to someone who says, you know, it's only one meeting, it's really not going to make a difference? You know, how have you helped maintain that engagement with the office, even though you're not in DC year-round?
Well, it's just staying in touch, right? It's sending the emails, just touching base, and I think that what you have to do is you have to cultivate the relationships that are growing, and not all of them will grow. There are some offices in Colorado that we just really can't even get a meeting to see. But you know, there's this concept in sales called the funnel, and I'm sure anybody who's worked in sales, they've been taught this concept that, you know, there's a certain % of your cold calls are going to be people ready to listen to your pitch, and only a certain % of those, but a definite % of those are going to be people who will ask to learn more, and a % of them are going to be interested enough to ask you to put together a proposal, and a % of them are going to actually buy. And so to make a sale, you really, they say, all you have to do really is feed the funnel. But you can't go into every meeting. You can't think that every door you knock on is going to be a sale. Most won't, but you don't know which ones will. So you knock on as many as you can, and you nurture the ones that'll talk to you as much as possible. You just keep the pressure on and trust the math, and eventually one of those gets through all the filters and turns into a sale. And I think our Hill visits are really the same idea. If we're all making as many calls as we can, and if we're going into each of the meetings treating it like it's the meeting that in the end will matter, eventually some of us will break through and get some great positive results. And you know, just the very fact that you're able to get a meeting with somebody gets you past that first filter.
Absolutely. Mike, thank you so much. This has been really, really great information. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with particularly Senator Bennett's office, and just overall in terms of advocating on Capitol Hill. It's been valuable to me, and I hope all of our attendees found it very valuable as well, and we really look forward to seeing you in a week at LegCon.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and I've really enjoyed working with Senator Bennett's office.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mike. And again, we'll see you next week.
See you there.
Okay, thanks. Well, now I'd like to talk a little bit more and expand on some of what Mike talked about in terms of how you can maximize your influence during a Hill meeting. What you do during your Hill meeting to make sure your priorities are listened to by the member and the staff. First of all, you have to understand that both the member and the staff have hundreds of meetings a year with people all trying to advocate on particular issues. And this is a particularly busy time of year. We tend to refer to this as LegCon season, when many organizations and associations have their Hill days around this time of year. So you can imagine staffers have multiple meetings in one day. So you don't want your issues to be lost in the crowd of other advocates. So it's important to be prepared, to be concise, and focus so that staff and congressmen and women are able to understand what your priorities are and be able to take action. So let's talk about how you can prepare effectively for your meetings on Capitol Hill. So as a former teacher, I know the value of homework. It really helps you prepare for what you're going to be facing, whether it's the test or whether it's a lesson that you have at school, just like Capitol Hill. So we ask that before your meeting you do some homework. One of the things, and I think Josh will talk about this a little bit in the webinar, is that you should have received, if you're attending LegCon, you should have received an email today with lots of prep materials for LegCon. Hopefully you can take some time over the next week and review those materials prior to LegCon. But you'll all receive hard copies of those documents at LegCon. But it's really important that you take some time to review those documents and also review materials on PTA's advocacy webpage. We have lots of materials generally about, we have our advocacy toolkit, we have our Takes Action page that lists all the legislation that National PTA supports, in addition to all the letters to policymakers that National PTA has submitted over the last, actually we have letters from 2015 and 2016 on the website. Also, we'll be debuting tomorrow a website specifically on the Every Student Succeeds Act, which will have a lot of specific information about the bill itself and summaries, but also very pointed information about the statewide family engagement centers that will help you be an even more effective advocate on the Hill Day on March 10th. The other thing is that you really need to make sure that you have some examples in your back pocket, and you really want to bring this issue home to the member of Congress. I think Mike touched upon it when he was speaking about how Senator Bennett really wanted to hear what the parents in Colorado wanted. So it's really important that you can come to the table to these meetings with specific examples, personal stories, and data or statistics, that will reinforce the message that you give to the member of Congress or the staff member that you meet with. Legislators really value your thoughts, especially as a constituent, and they will rely on the local stories and the sources of the work that they do. Policymakers want to be helpful as you are their constituent, and quite frankly, they do want to be reelected, so they want to help you. But more importantly, they want to know how they will be making a difference in the district and their community. So you need to be able to come prepared to explain how this will how statewide family engagement centers will impact you, your family, the school, and your children in the district or your state. But the homework assignment that you have doesn't just focus on the issue you're advocating for. You need to know who it is you are advocating to.
Thanks, Jackie. So I'm going to cover the second part of your homework assignment. So the first one is knowing the issue and bringing it home. And the second one is knowing who you're talking to and tailoring your message to persuade them to your point. And part of that is doing your homework on the member of Congress that you're meeting. You know, if it's the senator or the representative, they all have websites. So on your screen right now, you see an example is, Michael Bennett's website. And you can find these websites by usually just going from the last name, so Bennett, and he's in the Senate, so .senate.gov. Or, if you're in Pennsylvania, it could be Barletta.house.gov. So just the last name, .chamber, education.gov. And on these websites, they have a ton of great information. They have their biographies up there. They list their priorities, their legislation, what they've supported, what their awards are. So, I mean, the list goes on and on. But it's important for each one of these meetings before you come to D.C. or the night before to just quickly go on and browse it. On their biography, you can see, you know, what committees they sit on. If they sit on an education committee, that is really good to know. If they sit on an appropriations committee that deals with education, that is really good to know, because that means that their staffers know what you're talking about, and you might not have to go from the 101 of this is education to, you know, right into, well, here's statewide family engagement centers, and this is part of it. So, you know, those things are all very important so that you're not caught off guard or don't offend an office by not knowing about their representative or the senator. Also, in these bios, you can, and also in certain sections on issues, they usually cover, you know, how they feel about labor, how they feel about defense, and then they usually have a section of how they feel about education. It's usually listed under issues, under legislation, or under priorities is the names that they usually go underneath. And that's something else you should look into, is where do they stand on education? What they usually easily spell it out on their website, that we stand for this, we like this, we do not like this. And that's just good to know, because this way when you go into the meeting, you can, again, tailor your persuasive speech and the way to get your message across in a way that they would like. As you know, Republicans and Democrats are very different people, and they stand for different issues, and it's important to make sure that your message comes across differently depending on that office. And the last part is, you know, in those bios, which is always a good thing, usually at the bottom, they list if they're a family. They list that they've been married for this many years, have this many kids, and this many grandkids. When you see that, I mean, the flashing lights come on. This is really important. This is a good thing that they can see, that we can connect on, because we both have kids. We both know how it works, or had kids, or they grew up, or whatever else. So all these things are really good to, again, tailor that message and find a very effective way of getting it across, where you build that relationship that Mike talked about, because you both see eye to eye and you both like these ideas in education. So with that, so again, just make sure that you know where you're standing on the issue before you go into those offices, and what their background is on the issues and what they've been doing in the past. And with that, we can go into how to make a good pitch when you're advocating, and Jackie will cover that.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Well, meetings with senators and representatives or their staff in Washington, D.C. can usually be pretty brief. Sometimes it can be 15 minutes, and sometimes it can be a little longer, maybe even 30 minutes. Sometimes they can be interrupted. Sometimes they can be out in a hallway, but usually they're held in the office. They may even be held in the front office portion of the member's office, or they could be actually in a conference room. So it can be intimidating for a lot of people when there's a lot of uncertainties leading up to the meeting itself. So as a result, it really pays off to be well prepared before you ever set foot in the office. And Mike talked a little bit about that, how he was well prepared with his elevator pitch, and he was able to adapt, knowing after finding out that Senator Bennett wouldn't be able to be there for the entire time, and he had to refocus his efforts on the education legislative assistant, who would be taking the meeting for the most part. You will be most effective in a meeting if you have a clear goal in mind for the meeting, you have brief talking points to convey, and then a clear sense of what you are asking the legislator to do. You also need to know and expect what to, or have a good idea of what you're walking into in the office as well. So that's why we're here to give you all this information this evening. It's really important that you know your talking points. Josh mentioned that depending on the member that you're meeting with, some members may have a really strong understanding of education issues and policy, particularly if they serve on the education committee, either in the House or Senate. If they don't, you really may have to take some more time to explain to them what family engagement is, and in particularly what the statewide family engagement centers are, especially if that member is not on the committee. The staffer, even the member, may have not even read the education bill yet. It's also important to not assume that the legislator or staffer knows everything. With over 8,000 bills introduced each year, it's really difficult for staff and members to know all the issues in all of the bills. You should be the expert on the issue that you're advocating for, and then be able to explain the importance of why you want them to do what you're asking them to do. Furthermore, you want to make sure that they return to you over and over and over again as the expert on education issues, and particularly family engagement. The other thing I want to mention too about knowing your ask, every congressional staffer is waiting for this. They know you're coming to ask them to do something. You're not just coming to say hi. You're coming because you have a particular ask for them that you want them to do. You really need to have this. That's why we have one prepared for you. The question is, you should know, the ask is, is whether they're going to sponsor a bill, oppose a bill, should they support a particular funding program, which is what we're going to be asking at LegCon. If you have too many priorities, though, or your requests are vague, it's really hard for the staff member of the legislature to know what to do and how to make you as their constituent happy. We really want to make the request simple and clear and give them a reason to follow through on the request. Josh is going to talk a little bit more later about our specific request that we have at LegCon. But how are you going to know what to ask? We did talk a little bit about the reference materials that you already received, but we've got you covered. Don't worry. If you're coming to LegCon, we've got you taken care of.
Absolutely, Jackie. I know that it gets a little bit nerve-wracking when you hear all this information and hear how important these Hill meetings are, and then you're like, what am I going to do when I'm in them? Well, that's why we have LegCon, and that's why on March 9th is a full day of sessions and workshops and speakers to get us ready for the big Hill Day on the 10th. So on March 8th, already there are 2 sessions that we have planned that will go over what statewide family engagement centers are, what our main ask is, how you can go about doing that, samples, examples, practices. So rest assured that we're not going to just throw you in with the wolves. We are definitely going to make sure that you are experts. Obviously, you're already experts in family engagement, and now you're going to become experts in our ask of how we can support family engagement at all levels and help the federal government support family engagement as well. And as Jackie already noted, if you are attending LegCon, you should already receive some of these materials through an email from our colleague Lindsay Kabatsky earlier today. And that information is something you can read over the upcoming week. And again, we'll be covering that information at LegCon as well. So now the $1 million question, what is the ask? So the ask is actually clearly laid out on your screen. And the ask is to support a robust funding level for statewide family engagement centers at no less than its authorized level of $10 million. So what did all that jargon say? What it said is that we are supporting, in general, we're supporting statewide family engagement centers. And it's currently authorized in the Every Student Succeeds Act. And it's authorized at $10 million. So although it's authorized there, it doesn't mean that they will get that funding for it. It just means they would like it to be $10 million. So that is why we're saying, if you would like it to be $10 million, why don't we make it $10 million? And that is what we're pushing for. And the language in the beginning, a robust level, there are many people on the Hill that might not be happy when we talk for certain amounts of money or $10 million in general. So if not 10 million or if more than 10 million, we just want it to be a substantial amount to help out for family engagement. And again, this ask you'll see clearly laid out in these words over and over again during LegCon and before LegCon. But it really is that passionate feel in yourself to say it. So if you don't want to read it word for word, you don't have to. All you need to know is statewide family engagement centers, at least $10 million. And that is the ask. And before we move forward, I know that I have been receiving a lot of questions from others about, well, are we only allowed to talk about this? in general, we do have a full public policy agenda, and there are many issues that we cover in education. So absolutely, you are allowed to cover other areas, and you can talk about other issues of education. We just ask that this is the main point that you're making. You start with this point, we go through the full information of this point, and we end with this point, because this is truly what will build a family engagement. But during the meeting, you are absolutely allowed to talk about our other education initiatives, especially as they affect your local and state. So why?
Josh, this is Jacki.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I was to your point, is that absolutely, I think it's great that attendees talk about other issues that are pertinent to their communities and schools. Just a piece of advice is that you should probably only limit it to 3 main issues. If you do try to throw in too many issues in one meeting, it can be very confusing and cumbersome for the staffer to really get a true understanding of what you're asking them to do and how you want them to help, because really that's what they're there for. They, as you are their constituents, and they are there to help you. And if you throw too many things at them at once, they're probably less likely to be able to address them. So we'd recommend that you keep your requests to 3 things, or 3 major points that you're talking about. And as Josh said, we definitely encourage you to keep the focus on the funding for the statewide family engagement centers during LegCon, during March 10th. And then if there's other issues, absolutely take the time and opportunity to share those with them as well.
So I guess the next question is, why exactly are we supporting statewide family engagement centers, and why are we asking everyone to support them and to go to the member of Congress to push for that?
Great, Josh. Thank you. I just wanted to add one more thing as well in terms of, you mentioned authorization and appropriations. Josh mentioned that the statewide family engagement centers are authorized in the Every Student Succeeds Act, which means the program was created. So that means that the program is created in law. But now we have to work on appropriations, which means we actually have to get the money for the centers to go into being. As many of you probably are aware, the statewide family engagement centers in their former capacity were called the PIRCs, the Parental Information and Resource Centers, and they were defunded back in, the last year they were funded was back in 2010. And so it's really important that we restart this funding mechanism for the statewide family engagement centers, which is why one of the reasons it's a key priority for us and key reason we're making this request to members of Congress during LegCon. The importance of family engagement centers and family engagement period is that we know through research the impact that effective family engagement can have on students and schools. We know that students with engaged families attend school more regularly, earn better grades, enroll in more advanced level classes, and have higher graduation rates. Furthermore, we know that schools with engaged families have less teacher turnover and typically have overall greater results in reading and math, and ultimately overall school improvement. In addition, we know that students attending schools that embed family engagement as one of 5 essential components for improvement have seen greater results in, again, math and reading and overall performance. The statewide family engagement centers really have 3 core functions. They will work with state and local level agencies to support family engagement. They will provide professional development to school districts and educators on evidence-based and effective family engagement strategies and practices. And lastly, they will be able to provide direct services to families on how to effectively work with their child's school and teachers to improve their child's academic outcomes and overall well-being. These important functions will help to improve the partnerships between families, communities, and schools to provide a better education to all students. Now that you know how to prepare for a meeting, what will you do once you arrive on Capitol Hill, Josh?
Thanks, Jacki. So we've talked a lot about preparation, and that really is key, is working through these documents that we sent and doing your homework on the issue as well as the senator. But now it's actually time to meet with your senator or representative and their staff. So how to go about doing that exactly? Well, the first thing to keep in mind for a meeting is to make sure that you arrive a few minutes early. I was always told when I was playing sports that if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, and if you're late, you're in trouble. So I always make sure that I'm early to meetings. So make sure that about at least 5 minutes before the meeting, you're already at the office. With that being said, it is always very crowded, and there's a lot of people trying to meet with their members of Congress. So coming 30 minutes early and waiting in the couch might not be necessary. Again, 5 to 10 minutes is a perfect amount of time to come into the office and introduce yourself. So what do you do when you first get into the office? You open the magical door of Capitol Hill and your congressman's office, and you see all these people inside working on issues. The first thing that people often forget to do or walk straight past is that there's usually a person right next to the door at a desk, and that's the scheduler and receptionist. And that's the first person that you should talk to and let them know that you're here on behalf of this state. My name is Josh on behalf of National PTA, and I have a meeting with so-and-so at this time. And I think that is the best way to go into the meeting and to start and to make sure that, again, that you're there on time and that you automatically start talking to the scheduler to get the meeting so they can reach out to the staffer. The next point to take into consideration is to be very flexible. Again, Jackie has already covered this a little bit before, but these meetings, they have a lot of meetings every day, and things get changed at a drop of a hat. There are people, the congressman has to go vote right away. He gets pulled into another meeting. She has to go meet with another congresswoman or man, and that happens all of the time. What you expect and what you fill out on your sheets may not actually occur on March 10th. So making sure that you keep a positive attitude no matter who you're meeting with and what changes. And in general, meeting with anyone on Capitol Hill is effective. So meeting with the staffers, as we talked about, and as Mike already discussed with his experience in Colorado and with Juliana, is that they're often even more beneficial because they're so knowledgeable on the subject and making those relationships. It's also what changes a lot is where you meet. You might meet a staffer or senator or congressman. You might meet them in the hallway or in between meetings. You might meet them in the reception area by one of the couches, or you can meet them in their office as well. But the meeting location often does throw people off, but in general, it's probably the smallest aspect of the meeting. It doesn't necessarily matter where you meet them, just that you're meeting someone. So with that, we can talk. I'll turn it over to Jackie to talk about advocating and the next steps during a meeting.
Great, thank you, Josh. Typically before your meeting, and we'll talk more about this at LegCon, but you want to make sure that you've assigned roles for the various people in the meeting, the various PTA members also in the meeting with you. Who's going to lead the introductions, who's going to give the main talking points, and who's going to take notes, and then who's going to provide the closing, and who's going to make the ask, and then who's going to provide the closing and follow-up portion of the meeting. So you want to have all those roles situated before you go into a meeting. But when you get there, you want to make sure you do introductions, allow everyone to introduce themselves and indicate where they're from, particularly their city, and obviously they'll know where you are in the state, but let them know where the city you come from or the town you come from. You never know with the staffer that you're meeting with. A lot of the staffers who work for members of Congress are from that state or congressional district. So they may have gone to the school in your town, or they may know your next door neighbor. You never know. So it's really important that when you do your introductions, you not only state your name and the local PTA that you're affiliated with, but also indicate your town or your city. That will help you make that connection, because like I said, you never know if that staffer or even the member of Congress that their child goes to that school, or their child did go to the school that you're the PTA president at. So it's really important that you make that connection, but you don't want to spend too much time talking about everything back home. You want to make sure that you get into your pitch as quickly as possible, your talking points, and make the ask that you have, or if you have a couple other issues that you want to talk about, that you make sure you have enough time to go through them all. You don't want to have too many issues and then not be able to cover all the important talking points and then requests that you have for the member of Congress. I think that's all I had, Josh. And I guess the next one is me for the next one. At your meeting, one of the most important things is to have a conversation. Josh mentioned this earlier, is that not every member or staffer may understand or know the topic or issue that you're discussing with them. So make sure that you leave some time for them to ask questions, and then also maybe ask them a question too. For example, you could start the meeting by asking them or saying that you're there to talk to them about the statewide family engagement centers, and then ask them, are they familiar with the statewide family engagement centers provision in the Every Student Succeeds Act? That really gives you a chance to figure out how much they know or don't. They could just say right off the bat that they have no idea what you're talking about, and they really look forward to learning more about you, or about statewide family engagement centers from you. So don't be afraid to ask them questions, and give them the opportunity to ask you questions as well. You want to make sure that you share your stories. Remember, you want to have all of those great stories and information and data in your back pocket to really drive home the importance of the topic you're talking about, in this case, family engagement. The other thing is, don't forget the ask. As I mentioned before, every congressional staffer will be waiting for you to say what you want them to do. And this year, not only are we making the general request to fund the statewide family engagement centers, but at LegCon we'll be having these letters that we call, that on Capitol Hill they call Dear Colleague letters. We are in the final steps, I think, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, of securing a Dear Colleague. We have the one definitely in the Senate, but a Dear Colleague in the House, which means members of Congress themselves sign on to this letter to the appropriator saying, we support this program and we want you to fund this program. So we will have Dear Colleague letters from the House and the Senate in your Hill packets, and that's also going to be one of the asks that you will be making to your members of Congress, that you want them to sign on to this letter that supports statewide family engagement centers. There was nothing more powerful than them actually signing their name to a letter saying that they support funding for the statewide family engagement centers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at LegCon, and you'll be able to see the letters. You'll have the letters in your packet as well. One thing that is to note is that sometimes a member may be dismissive, or even a staffer may not seem very interested, or they could ask you some probing questions about why statewide family engagement centers are needed, or why the federal government should help support statewide family engagement centers. We'll provide you with all sorts of talking points and the scenarios that you may face, but keep a level head. Don't let it frustrate you or fluster you, and keep on topic and keep to your talking points. You may disagree with each other, and that's okay, but stay polite and carry on, and if they have any questions, or you can follow up with them later, that's the best way to address those types of situations. So what do members and their bosses want to hear the most?
Well, that's a great question. On your screen right now, we have the survey results from the Congressional Management Foundation. They surveyed a number of staffers on the Hill to see what their member cared most about hearing, as well as what they wanted to hear as well to tell their member of Congress. So the results are on your screen. The most important thing to hear about is the information about the impact the bill will have on the district. So, 91% of respondents said this, and that's something that they ask all of the time. Well, how at least in the House, how will this affect District 8? In the Senate, how will this affect our entire state? And in our Hill packets that you'll be receiving for LegCon, there will be talking points for statewide family engagement centers, and then there will be numbers based on PTA members, number of public schools, numbers of funding in the past, what you can expect. So that's ways that you can say that this affects your district in general. And another way you can do that is also just out of personal experiences. What does family engagement mean to your school? Or in the past, what did family engagement mean to your children or your friends' children when you saw that parents got more involved in education? That affects the district, and overall that affects graduation rates, and that affects the economy. And the scales keep going up and up of the importance of this. So just make sure that you keep that ask local. I know we keep saying that, but that is truly the golden key is keeping it local. The next thing that is important to let congressmen know is your reason for supporting or opposing a bill or issue. So in this case, again, you'll have talking points of the importance of statewide family engagement centers and what those engagement centers do and how that can affect children. And then the last one is a personal story related to the bill. And again, we kind of talked about this a little bit, is your experience in family engagement and what it meant to your children and your friends' children and moving forward. Or if you did not see that and you think that by doing this that you think education in schools should have more of this because you didn't have enough, they didn't offer enough. Those are also good stories, that there is the need for it. So again, these are the three topics to just kind of make sure you have answers for and a good way to really get close with the office and have that personal touch. So now we're getting kind of towards the end of your meeting. We've discussed how to introduce yourself when you get into the office, then to get into the meeting with the staffer or member of Congress, and to make your ask and to be efficient on the ask, and then how to make it local. And now we're talking about towards the end of your meeting. So one thing to be cognizant of is the time. A lot of meetings are between anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. But they usually don't go over 30 minutes. As Jacki has already talked about, they do have a lot of meetings throughout the day, and in between the days, and they're still trying to do their own work with legislation. So being cognizant of that, if you see that the Hill staffer is getting kind of antsy, then make sure you make that ask very effectively and right away, and then start asking questions and move forward on that. And then the next part is and this is always the part everyone forgets, because you're excited, you had a fantastic meeting, everything went so well, the congressman is truly thinking about supporting statewide family engagement centers, and then you have to give them the information, because leaving behind the folder that you're going to receive is what keeps that meeting going. So at the end, they had a great conversation, but they after the full day of work or a month later, they might not entirely remember what the meeting was about. But this folder will tell them everything that they need to know about statewide family engagement centers. So it's really important that at the end of every meeting, or even in the beginning of the meeting, you hand them that folder right away, so they have some kind of takeaway from the meeting to draw back on. As you know, Mike was talking about his experience with Juliana, that not right away did he hear from her. It wasn't until a few weeks later that she looked back on this material and knew that it was important, and looked back at her notes of what she talked to Mike about, that she actually moved forward with it. So again, make sure you have that, and feel free to use it during your meeting. Oftentimes when I go to meetings, I open it up right away and I start pulling out the documents and pointing to it and telling them exactly what's in there and what they're looking at. So that's also very effective to do. And the last important thing is to thank them. It really goes a long way saying thank you and telling them how much their time means to you, that you really appreciate the meeting. Again, no matter who you're meeting with, the congressman or the staffer, their time is very important, and it is very stretched. So it is hard to get meetings, and them giving you that time is fantastic. So just showing that sincerity about that is something that they always really like a lot. And again, you heard Mike talk about it, and we can tell you a lot of other stories of that simple thank you. So now I'll turn it over to Jacki. As now that we're at the end of our meeting, now what happens after the meeting?
Great, thank you, Josh. Well, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the power of social media, so it's really important right after your meeting, as you're walking down those halls of Congress, that you post the photos and information about your meeting on Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag PTALegCon. You should also tag your member of Congress. Almost every member of Congress has a Twitter handle. So if you are not following your member of Congress on Twitter right now or even on Facebook, you should do so before you get to DC, so that when you're walking down the halls of Congress after your meeting, you can immediately post something about your meeting, post a picture, post a little note, and we'll provide sample tweets for you and sample posts for you at LegCon. But it's really important that you do that. It really keeps the messaging at the forefront of that member of Congress, and hopefully will help get them support the things and the priorities that PTA and you have as parents and families in education. The other thing that's critical is to make sure that you send a thank you email as soon as possible after your meeting. We'll provide you with templates and sample thank you letters or thank you emails that you can send after your meeting. It is so important, as even Mike alluded to, that follow-up email that he sent to Senator Bennett's education staffer and reiterated the key points about why family engagement was so important, really led to that continuing relationship and engagement with Juliana. So it's really important that you send that thank you email as soon as possible, no later than about a week after your meeting. So how are you going to get around DC when you get here? Navigating DC. Washington, D.C. is relatively small, for example. The U.S. Capitol is only 2.2 miles away from the Lincoln Memorial, but it can be tricky to get around if you are unfamiliar with the city. Or I would even say sometimes if you're familiar with the city, because sometimes I can even have challenges as someone who's lived here for most of my life. So with that, we wanted to share with you a map of the metro. We'll also make sure that there's maps of the metro system in your Hill packet that you received today electronically, and that will also be in your legislative conference tote bag that you get when you arrive. But most PTA members take the metro from the hotel to Capitol Hill. Our hotel is situated right on top of the Crystal City Metro stop. Depending on which side of the Capitol complex you are going to, either the House or Senate, you will either want to go to Union Station, which is the Senate side of the Capitol, or Capitol South, which is the House side of the Capitol Metro stops. To do so, you would take the yellow line to L'Enfant Plaza and transfer to the orange and silver lines to get to Capitol South, where the House buildings are. Or you can take the yellow line to Gallery Place, Chinatown, and transfer to the red line to get to Union Station. Again, all of this will be in your Hill Day packets, and you'll have metro maps in there as well. And certainly government affairs staff will be happy to help you navigating metro as well. Metro fare cards are available for purchase at any time in the metro station kiosk below the hotel or beforehand with the link, which is the Metro webpage it's called WMATA. It's WMATA.com, and if you go to that website, you can purchase it in advance if you want. But really, it's pretty easy to purchase at the hotel since we're right near the hotel is right on top of the metro station. For convenience, we do recommend that you purchase the cards when you get in DC, and about a round-trip metro fare should be no more than $8 to get to Capitol Hill, round trip from the hotel to Capitol Hill. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you to talk exactly about what it's like on Capitol Hill.
Well, Capitol Hill is a pretty big place, and it's definitely walkable, but it's more than a block. So it's important to make sure that you're comfortable. Wear comfortable shoes for walking. It's often the quickest way of doing that is walking from building to building. And also make sure that you're aware of the weather. So if it's raining and if it's going to rain, of course, umbrellas and things so you don't go in all wet into the office. But if it's just a little bit breezy and you can handle it, it might be best to make sure that if you don't need an umbrella, to not take one. If it's not too cold, to maybe not use your jacket, because again, you'd have to carry that around for a full day on Capitol Hill. And at first, it seems fine, but after many meetings, it does become a hassle, and especially with security. So if you look on your map on the screen right now, the Capitol building sits in the center of the House and Senate office buildings. All House buildings are on the south side of the Capitol, as you see the three at the bottom, and the Senate buildings are all on the north side. So also, look at the House office buildings. There's a circle around the Capitol South Metro. As you can see, that's just 1 block away from all those Capitol buildings. And if you look at the north side, there's the Senate office buildings, and there's also a circle around a little M that says Union Station, and that's about 1.5 blocks away. Another thing to be aware of is the entrances to get into each building. They are clearly labeled, so when you're walking around the building, there are arrows that point to visitors entrance, and there are arrows that point to staff entrance. So again, follow the arrows to the visitors entrance. And in every entrance, you'll have to go through security. So it's just good to be aware that that's going to happen and to kind of prepare for that. The more things you bring are the more things that have to go through security. So definitely pack light for the night, for the afternoon. And a few things to keep note of when you are going through security. There are a few prohibited items. So of course, you make sure that you don't have any aerosol containers in your purse or pockets, or any sprays, any sharp objects. Of course, anything like mace or pepper spray, razors, you know, the common sense things to make sure you do not have when you go into the Capitol. And also, they do not permit any luggage. So if you are bringing if you're bringing a bag that's larger than 18 inches wide and 14 inches high and 8.5 inches deep, that's considered luggage, and they will not permit that into the buildings. So that would be best to leave at the hotel, and then go back to it or with the concierge and things like that, and go back to it at that point in time. So again, just as you're preparing for your Hill Day, make sure it's as easy as possible to get through security, because there will be lines, and it could affect you being on time for your meeting. So the lighter, the better. And now I'll turn over to Jackie to continue talking about more of how to get into each building and where they're located.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. Well, most of you will be attending essentially several different, probably maybe even 6 different Capitol Hill buildings. I don't know about totally 6, but probably 4. There's 6 different Capitol Hill buildings, and you'll probably end up visiting at least 4 out of the 6 on your visit on March 10th. I wanted to make sure that you knew about this, because it is kind of can be kind of confusing and daunting sometimes. The House office buildings can be a little confusing at first because they have a different numbering system. If you'll see here, we provided that in Canon it's a 3-digit number. So for example, it's 245, which means it's kind of typical numbering system. So that means that office is on the 2nd floor and it's room 245. Longworth is a little bit different. There's a number 1 in front of every office building in Longworth. So in the example that we have Longworth 5, and in this instance, this room is on the 2nd floor, not the 1st floor, because every single office building in Longworth has a number 1 in front of it. Rayburn has a number 2 in front of every office location. So when you have office 2245, that means that it's still that is also the 2nd number is the floor that the office is on. So for 2245 Rayburn, it would be on the 2nd floor, and that would be the office building. Once you get the groove of it, it'll be pretty easy to understand. The Senate buildings have traditional numbering systems. So if it's office Russell, if it's Dirksen, the 4th, it's just that pesky House office buildings system. But now that you know the secret, it's pretty easy. So the next thing that we want to go over is where to eat. And I think I was breaking up a little bit. I know we've had some challenges, so I apologize for that. But hopefully you still got the gist of what I was saying. Where to eat? There's several restaurants in Capitol Hill. The best places to go are the Dirksen Cafeteria, which is in the Senate, and that's in the basement. There's also in the Senate, there is the Hart Senate Chef, I'll take a step back. I apologize. The Dirksen cafeteria has full service hot meals and is open from 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Daily. In the Hart Senate Chef, that's more of a little cafeteria, smaller cafeteria style. They don't have they have some hot food, but not as much as the Dirksen North cafeteria. So in the Senate Chef, you have some hot foods, but a lot of prepared sandwiches or salads and drinks and coffee there. On the House side, you have the Longworth cafeteria, which is in the basement of the Longworth House office building, and that is a full-service cafeteria as well. And then there's also the Rayburn, which is also another full-service cafeteria in the basement of the Rayburn office building. So those are your options where to eat when you're on Capitol Hill. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell everyone about our great advocacy resources that are available that people can look at prior to coming to LegCon.
Thanks, Jackie. So, already we've been sending emails and we gave you a lot of information, but there could always be more. So, because advocacy is definitely a skill that's always working and always consistent, and we can always improve and continue. So, I did want to mention one area on our website is our advocacy resource page. So at pta.org, if you look under advocacy, they have an advocacy toolkit section, and then the list goes on for other areas. So under the advocacy toolkit section, this is where you will find some meetings about some information on how to lobby the PTA way, how a bill becomes a law, conducting effective Hill visits, working with the media, preparing op-eds. All of those types of things can all be found in that section under the advocacy toolkit. So it's definitely something to check out before LegCon, and if not, definitely after, of ways that you can be in the know and keep up with Congress and with the media. The other section of our website is the LegCon webinars. So we have been recording all of our webinars, all 4 of them, and we've been posting them on our website for those that weren't able to be in attendance to see. So absolutely, you can see them after LegCon and share them with others. It is pta.org/LegCon, and then there is a section that is for webinars that'll be on the right-hand side, and all these will be listed with the PowerPoints. And then the last thing is, and Jackie already announced this, we're very proud to announce our new webpage that consists of PTA membership, PTA information on how to understand the Every Student Succeeds Act. So on this webpage, we list, again, some 101s on the Every Student Succeeds Act, we list memos on the changes, we explain the titles, the Department of Education and what they're offering. So there's a ton of information on there that everyone should definitely check out. We just started airing it this week, so it's very exciting, and hopefully it's very helpful for everyone. And please let us know what you think of it. So now we'll turn it over back to Jackie to wrap up our webinar.
Great. Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. And as you all already heard, we have know probably from all the communications you've received from us from LegCon, and we look forward to seeing all of you. And if you aren't already registered for LegCon, we hope you'll still consider. There's still time. You can register, as Josh mentioned, our webpage. It's www.pta.org/LegCon, all one word. So we hope that you'll consider registering if you haven't already. We have excellent, excellent speakers, wonderful panels, and amazing, and all of you as amazing advocates will be there as well. So it's a great opportunity to advocate and to network and to learn from your fellow PTA advocates. As you can see here, we have Susan B. Newman as our keynote speaker, who is a former assistant secretary at the Department of Education under the Bush administration. We have Rahima Ellis, who is our evening guest speaker, and then we just announced and just confirmed that Cecilia Munoz, the assistant to the president and director of the Domestic Policy Council, at the White House will be our special guest at the luncheon as well. So we're really excited about everything, and I hope that I look forward to seeing all of you. And if you haven't already registered, I hope you will as soon as you get off this webinar. And with that, I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions. I know we had a few questions that we were able to answer during the presentation, but if anyone has any specific questions about Hill Day or about any of the information that we provided, Josh and I are here to answer those for you now.
So if you'd like to ask a question, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a chat and questions box. We're not going to unmute anyone for this webinar, so if you could please type in your question in the form of a question, we'll be happy to answer that.
Well, if no one has any questions, and I'll talk for a second if anyone thinks of anything in the meantime, but we just wanted to make you all aware with so much going on at National PTA, not only from the advocacy perspective, but from the program perspective, we wanted to make sure that you could stay connected and knew all the wonderful work and resources that were available to you. So I hope that you, if you already don't have a bookmark, that you bookmark the PTA.org webpage, that you're following PTA on Facebook, and then if you're not already on Twitter, we should get you on Twitter, and we'll hook you up at LegCon. But follow National PTA on Twitter and use these social media tools to support you and get the attention of your legislators on Hill Day. We also have a YouTube channel, a Pinterest page, and we have our One Voice blog. And then last but not least, a Flickr account that has all the wonderful photos from previous LegCons and previous PTA events. And we look forward to seeing all of your beautiful faces at LegCon and adding to the wonderful Flickr account that we have and great photos of all of you. So I think do we have any questions there, Josh? I don't think we do. But I really appreciate, if we don't get any questions here in the next minute, I really appreciate all of you taking the time to join us this evening. I know we're a little bit over our time, but I hope you found this information to be valuable, and we're just really excited that LegCon is right around the corner, and we look forward to seeing you all in person very soon. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email anyone on the government affairs team. I think you've probably all received a ton of emails from us over the last few months, so don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. And with that, Josh, if you have anything, I think we can say goodnight to everybody and tell them we'll see them in a week.
That's all I have as well. It was great being with everyone on this webinar. We look forward to seeing everyone next week, and have a good rest of your night.
Thank you, everyone.